Welcome to Puzzle Proof. Join us as we unravel today's captivating story and solve exciting puzzles together. Get ready to engage your mind. Let the journey start. Chapter 1. The Scene of the Crime. The autumn sun hung low in the sky as Hercule Poirot alighted from the taxi at the entrance to the Regent Zoological Gardens. A gentle breeze stirred the coppery leaves along the path, and the crisp air bore the mingled scents of earth, foliage, and distant animal musk. Poirot adjusted his immaculate grey suit and patted his neat, waxed moustache with satisfaction. It was rare to have an opportunity to enjoy a day at leisure, away from London's frenetic bustle, and he was determined to make the most of it. "Ah, mon ami," Poirot said to Captain Hastings, who was struggling to keep up on the gravel path. "There is a certain charm, n'est-ce pas, in observing the harmony of nature, even if it is enclosed within walls." Hastings smiled, wiping his brow. "I admit, Poirot, I was somewhat skeptical at first, but these creatures, especially the new Bengal tigers, they are magnificent. The zoo was a beloved institution, famous for its conservation efforts and extensive collection of exotic animals. Today, it was alive with families and children, the air filled with laughter and excited chatter. Poirot noted the orderly way the staff moved, attentive keepers and guides ensuring the visitors enjoyed the day without disruption. "Let us proceed, Hastings." "We shall start with the tiger enclosure," Poirot said, his eyes twinkling with curiosity. As they walked, Poirot observed with his customary attentiveness. A zookeeper nearby was carefully feeding the parrots, their feathers a riot of colours in the afternoon sun. Across the way, a group of children clustered around the chimpanzee house while a pair of elderly ladies admired the giraffes, exchanging notes about their recent travels to Africa. Everything seemed perfectly normal. Yet Poirot's instincts, sharpened by years of confronting the darkest facets of human nature, told him that even the most serene places could conceal secrets. Suddenly, a piercing scream sliced through the happy noises of the day. Poirot and Hastings exchanged a quick glance before hurrying toward the source. The cry had come from the direction of the reptile house, a somewhat forbidding glass structure set apart from the colourful bird aviaries. As they rounded the corner, a small crowd had already gathered, held back by zoo staff and a few policemen who had arrived promptly. In the centre lay a man, motionless, his fine clothes dishevelled, a small ornate dagger protruding from his chest. Poirot immediately recognised him, Mr. Alistair Fenwick, the esteemed curator of the zoo, known for his strict management and dedication to its success. Poirot knelt down, observing the body with careful eyes. Fenwick's face was pale, lips slightly parted, his eyes glassy and unfocused. There was no sign of a struggle, no torn clothing save around the wound. The dagger was distinctive, an antique weapon, richly decorated, clearly not something one would expect to find in a modern zoo. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, straightening. "This is no accident, Hastings. Monsieur Fenwick has been deliberately murdered." Hastings looked grave. "But here, in broad daylight, and in front of so many visitors." "Precisely, my friend, which suggests the murderer either did not expect to be caught or wished for a spectacle. There is always a reason, no matter how baffling, behind such acts." The senior police officer in charge, Inspector Mallory, approached Poirot. "We've secured the scene, Monsieur Poirot. The dagger was missing from the zoo's tribal artefacts display. No forced entry and no witnesses so far. We would be grateful for your assistance." Poirot nodded. "Naturally, it is imperative we understand not only how, but why. Let us begin by questioning those closest to Monsieur Fenwick." Inspector Mallory led Poirot and Hastings to a nearby room, a small administrative office cluttered with papers, photographs of animals and plans of the zoo. Present were several key figures: Miss Evelyn Carrington, the assistant curator, Mr. Giles Thornton, a wealthy benefactor, Dr. Lillian Moore, the zoo's veterinarian, and Jack Collins, a young and somewhat nervous zookeeper. Poirot's gaze swept over them, noting immediately the subtle signals each displayed. Evelyn, tall and precise, had the cold composure of someone used to being in control. Her eyes flickered with a mixture of grief and guarded resentment. Giles, a portly man with a flushed complexion, avoided direct eye contact, fiddling with his pocket watch. Dr. Moore's expression was carefully neutral, though Poirot caught the briefest hint of tension in her jaw. Jack shifted uneasily on his feet, his hands clenched. "Madame, monsieur," Poirot began politely, "I am deeply sorry for this terrible loss. But to uncover the truth, I must ask you all some questions about Monsieur Fenwick's final hours." He addressed Evelyn first. "You worked closely with Monsieur Fenwick, yes? Was there any disagreement between you recently?" Evelyn hesitated a moment before answering. "We argued, yes. About funding and priorities. He was determined to push ahead with some new research that I believed was reckless." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "And Monsieur Thornton?" The benefactor cleared his throat. "I supported the zoo generously, but Fenwick was difficult. He resisted changes I proposed, including selling part of the grounds to ease financial strain. He was stubborn." Dr. Moore spoke softly. "Fenwick cared deeply for the animals, but his method sometimes conflicted with mine. He prioritized spectacle over welfare, which I opposed." Jack finally spoke up. "I was told off for neglecting the reptile house last week. Fenwick was furious, but I would never harm him." Poirot listened carefully, filing away each statement. "Inspector, if you would," Poirot said, "I wish to examine the scene more closely." Back at the reptile house entrance, Poirot crouched beside the body once more. He inspected the dagger, turning it over carefully. The craftsmanship was exquisite, with intricate carvings depicting scenes from a distant tribe. Poirot recognized it from the zoo's collection, a priceless piece locked securely behind glass. "No sign of forced entry," he murmured. Yet the dagger was removed from its display. Someone with access and knowledge. Poirot's eyes caught a faint trail of muddy footprints near the door to the reptile house, which stood ajar. The mud was peculiar, different from the soil in the rest of the zoo. There was also a delicate scent in the air, subtle yet distinct, like a tropical flower. Poirot mused. "A clue, perhaps. The murderer may have passed this way." Hastings leaned closer. "But no one seems to have seen anything." "That is the challenge, mon ami. The clever murderer uses the crowd and the environment as a mask." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows over the zoo, Poirot felt the familiar thrill of the hunt awaken in his veins. There was a story behind this crime, a tangled web of... Chapter 2. The suspects gather. The afternoon was fading swiftly into evening as Hercule Poirot stood once again within the quiet administrative room of the Regent Zoological Gardens. The police had politely but firmly cleared the public, leaving only the staff who had worked closely with Mr. Alistair Fenwick. Now they waited uneasily, like animals sensing an unseen predator. Inspector Mallory, a man of method and patience, had arranged for all the key individuals to be present. This was the first step in uncovering the truth, the gathering of suspects, as Poirot himself often put it, a necessary prelude to unraveling the tangled threads of a mystery. Poirot's keen eyes roved over the group before him. Each face told a story, some carefully concealed, others flashing faint emotions beneath the surface. First, there was Miss Evelyn Carrington, assistant curator. She was a woman in her early 30s, tall and statuesque, with raven black hair pulled back tightly and sharp, intelligent eyes. She carried herself with an air of authority and grace that suggested a lifelong struggle to be taken seriously in a male-dominated field. Her lips were pressed tightly, her posture rigid, but her fingers betrayed a nervous tension drumming lightly against her notebook. Next, Mr. Giles Thornton, the zoo's principal benefactor. He was a portly man with a ruddy complexion and a mop of thinning hair. His clothes were of fine cut, his expensive watch ticking rhythmically on his wrist, but his face was flushed with anger and frustration. He avoided meeting anyone's gaze directly, instead casting glances at the floor or out the window as though willing the events of the day to be undone. Beside him sat Dr. Lillian Moore, the veterinarian. She was elegant and composed with a coolness that at once suggested professionalism and something more guarded. Her dark eyes were piercing, and she wore a delicate silver brooch shaped like a bird, a subtle nod to her devotion to animal welfare. Poirot noticed a faint scar near her left temple, a detail she quickly concealed when his gaze lingered. Finally, there was Jack Collins, a young zookeeper in his mid-20s. His clothes were simple and worn, and there was a certain nervous energy about him. His blue eyes darted from one person to another, and his hands twitched as though he might fidget himself into exhaustion. Poirot noted the fresh scratches on his forearms, and the faint scent of wood shavings clung to his jacket. Poirot stepped forward, his elegant form commanding silence. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice calm but firm, "I thank you for your cooperation. The loss of Monsieur Fenwick is indeed a tragedy. It is for this reason we must seek the truth, no matter how difficult. Each of you was close to Monsieur Fenwick, and your words will help illuminate the events leading to his death." He turned first to Evelyn. "Mademoiselle Carrington, I understand you and Monsieur Fenwick had disagreements?" Evelyn nodded, swallowing quickly before speaking. "Yes, Monsieur Poirot, we argued over the zoo's direction. He was obsessed with his research projects, some involving rare plants and animals, and refused to listen to warnings that his experiments were risky, even dangerous." "Dangerous, you say?" "Yes. He was pursuing something he called the orchid cure. I didn't believe it was ethical, and I feared the consequences." Poirot's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "You were concerned enough to confront him?" "Yes, many times. But he was stubborn. He would not listen." "Very well. And you, Monsieur Thornton?" Poirot asked, turning to the benefactor. Giles sighed heavily. "The zoo is in financial trouble. I offered to help, but Fenwick refused to sell parts of the property, even though it might have saved the institution. He was more interested in his personal ambitions than the practical needs." "Did you argue with him?" "Certainly. I threatened to withdraw my support if he did not cooperate. But he was proud, and that pride has brought us to this sad day." Poirot made a mental note of Giles's frustration. Pride and money often bred dangerous motivations. "Dr. Moore," Poirot continued, "you have worked with Monsieur Fenwick on animal health?" "Yes, but I often disagreed with his methods. He prioritized publicity over welfare. I tried to intervene." Poirot sensed the doctor's restrained anger was not only professional, but deeply personal. "Did these disagreements ever escalate?" Dr. Moore hesitated, then said quietly, "We had a heated discussion recently. I warned him that his experiments could harm the animals. He dismissed me." Jack Collins, who had been shifting uneasily, now spoke up. "I was near the reptile house earlier that day. Fenwick was angry with me. He said I'd been careless with feeding schedules. I admit I made a mistake, but I did not harm him." Poirot observed the young man closely. The scratches on his arm suggested he had been working with animals recently, likely the reptiles. You say you were reprimanded? Yes, I'm sorry, but I swear I had nothing to do with this. Poirot's eyes lingered on Jack's jittery mannerisms. Nervousness alone was no proof of guilt, but it could hide deeper truths. Tell me, Inspector Mallory, Poirot said, have all the staff been accounted for? Is it possible someone else had access to the tribal artifacts display? Inspector Mallory shook his head. No, Monsieur Poirot. Only authorized personnel, including these four, and the curator himself, had the key. Poirot nodded slowly. Ah, so the dagger came from within. This is a murder by someone who knew the zoo intimately. He turned his attention to the details he had noticed earlier at the crime scene, the muddy footprints by the reptile house, the faint scent of tropical flowers lingering in the air. Such elements would, he hoped, offer clues in time. But tell me, Poirot said thoughtfully, was Monsieur Fenwick involved in any secret projects, perhaps not disclosed to the wider staff? Evelyn's eyes flickered, and she glanced briefly at Giles, who looked away. Dr. Moore's lip twitched slightly, but she remained silent. Jack appeared puzzled, as if unaware. Poirot made a note of the unspoken tension. Secrets, he knew, were often the key to unraveling motives. Thank you all, Poirot said, rising. I shall speak to each of you individually to learn more. Monsieur Fenwick's death will not remain a mystery. As the group dispersed, Hastings leaned toward Poirot. It's a tangled web, isn't it, Poirot? So many potential enemies, each with their own reasons to wish Fenwick harm. Oui, Hastings, but the truth is like a rare flower. It blooms only when carefully nurtured, and I, with my little grey cells, shall discover it. Outside the window, the sun sank behind the horizon, casting the Regent Zoological Gardens into twilight. Within its winding paths and animal enclosures, a murderer walked free. But Poirot, ever vigilant, was already several steps ahead. Chapter 3. Clues among the creatures. The morning following the grim events at Regent Zoological Gardens was thick with a damp mist that clung to the trees and softened the edges of the sprawling grounds. Hercule Poirot arrived early, long before the zoo opened to the public, accompanied by Captain Hastings and Inspector Mallory. Today was to be dedicated entirely to a thorough examination of the crime scene and the surrounding areas, for Poirot believed that every detail, no matter how small, might prove pivotal. The cold air was fragrant with the scent of earth and foliage, but Poirot's keen nose also caught something more elusive, a faint aroma that was oddly out of place amid the usual zoo smells. They began their investigation outside the reptile house, the glass structure where the body of Mr. Alistair Fenwick had been found. The door was now locked, secured by the police, but Poirot crouched beside the entrance to study the ground. "Observe, Hastings," Poirot instructed, pointing to a series of muddy footprints leading away from the door. "Notice how the impressions are shallow but deliberate. These are not the careless prints of a hurried passerby, but those of someone attempting to cover their tracks, stepping lightly and carefully." Hastings knelt to look. "The mud is darker here, almost like soil from a different part of the grounds. Strange for a place usually well kept." "Indeed," Poirot murmured. "The footprints seem to head toward the greenhouse, yes?" Inspector Mallory nodded. "We found similar mud near the orchid beds this morning." Poirot's eyes lit up with interest. "Orchids, you say?" "Exotic flowers, if I recall correctly, and not native to England. A perfect place to hide secrets." They proceeded toward the greenhouse, a large glass building buzzing quietly with the heat and humidity necessary for the tropical plants inside. As they entered, the warmth embraced them, carrying the sweet, heavy scent of flowers. Here, the rare orchids bloomed in delicate clusters, their vibrant colours a stark contrast to the misty chill outside. Poirot's gaze swept the rows of plants with the precision of a surgeon. The curator was involved in botanical research, was he not? Mallory answered. Yes. Fenwick was particularly interested in a rare species of orchid known locally as the midnight bloom, said to have remarkable medicinal properties. Poirot nodded thoughtfully. It is possible Monsieur Fenwick sought to develop a cure or treatment using this orchid. But such experiments can be dangerous, no? Some plants contain toxins that may be fatal if mishandled. Precisely, Mallory said. And some of Fenwick's colleagues were uneasy about his work. Poirot was silent a moment, then turned toward a young woman tending the plants nearby. She was slender, with soft features and dark hair tied back in a simple knot. When Poirot introduced himself, she gave a slight bow. "I am Clara Finch," she said softly. "I care for the orchids here." Monsieur Fenwick spoke of the midnight bloom with great passion. "Tell me, Mademoiselle Finch," Poirot said kindly, "did Monsieur Fenwick speak of these plants as having any special effects?" Clara hesitated, glancing toward the door as if worried. "He believed the orchid's extract might be a powerful medicine, a cure for diseases that conventional treatments could not touch, but it is experimental. Dangerous, too." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Dangerous how?" "Some toxins in the plant could be lethal if concentrated wrongly. Monsieur Fenwick was working on a formula, sometimes late into the night." As Clara spoke, Poirot noticed a small notebook resting on a nearby table. It was filled with neat, scientific notes and diagrams. Hastily, Clara added, "This belongs to me. I was assisting with some of the research under Monsieur Fenwick's supervision." Poirot requested to see the notebook and scanned it quickly. There were references to toxins, antidotes, and detailed instructions on extracting compounds. One page caught his attention, a hastily scribbled note warning against ingestion of any untested solutions. "Fascinating," Poirot mused. "This suggests that Monsieur Fenwick's death may be linked to his experiments." Hastings looked puzzled. "But how could a dagger be involved if poison was the cause?" "An excellent question, mon ami," Poirot replied. "We must consider that the dagger might be a symbol or a tool used in the act of murder rather than the sole cause of death." Poirot then turned back to the footprints. If the murderer came this way, they might have passed through the greenhouse. They followed the trail of mud carefully, which led them back toward the animal enclosures. Poirot stopped abruptly near the edge of the reptile house enclosure. "Look here," he said, pointing to the ground where there were faint marks, a scrape in the mud, almost as if someone had dropped something. Hastings bent down and picked up a small silver key, tarnished but clearly belonging to the zoo's staff. "This must be important," Hastings said. "I wonder who dropped it." Poirot took the key and examined it closely. It is a master key, capable of opening several doors, including the tribal artifacts room and the reptile house. Inspector Mallory frowned. "The key was reported missing yesterday, but no one mentioned it." "Someone did not want it known they had access," Poirot said. "We must learn whose key this was." The group proceeded to the tribal artifacts display. Poirot studied the locked case where the dagger had been kept, noting the complex mechanism and the absence of forced entry marks. This means the murderer had not only the key but also the knowledge to access this collection without drawing attention. Chapter 4. Secrets Behind Closed Doors. That evening, as a chill wind rustled the last amber leaves clinging to the trees around Regent Zoological Gardens, Hercule Poirot returned to the administrative offices for a series of private interviews. The long, quiet corridors echoed softly with the distant sounds of the night shift beginning and animals settling down for the darkness. Poirot preferred this time of day for questioning. Without the bustle of visitors and distractions of the daylight, people's true selves, their hidden emotions, often surfaced more readily. Inspector Mallory had arranged a small meeting room, simple but comfortable, where Poirot could speak to each suspect in turn, undisturbed. One by one they arrived, each carrying their own secrets and burdens. Evelyn Carrington first came, Miss Evelyn Carrington, her sharp eyes still reflecting the strain of the day. She sat rigidly, hands folded in her lap. "Miss Carrington," Poirot began gently, "you have spoken of your disagreements with Monsieur Fenwick over the orchid cure and other research, but tell me, was there more beneath these disputes? Personal matters, perhaps?" Evelyn hesitated. "There were tensions, yes. Fenwick was difficult and sometimes cruel. He dismissed my suggestions without consideration. I feared his recklessness would endanger the zoo." Poirot nodded, encouraging. "But did you ever fear for your own position? Could you lose your role if Fenwick's ambition succeeded?" Evelyn's eyes flickered with something akin to hurt pride. "I have devoted my life to this place. I would never betray it. But I admit, I worried the new projects might sideline me." Poirot's gaze softened. "It is a human fear, Miss Carrington. Yet the leap from worry to murder is vast." She looked away. "Of course." Poirot pressed gently. "Did Monsieur Fenwick threaten you, perhaps in private?" "Number but once. After a heated argument, he warned me not to interfere. I was unsettled, but I did not think him capable of such violence." Giles Thornton. Next was Mr. Giles Thornton, the benefactor, whose flushed face now showed more weariness than anger. "Monsieur Thornton, you have expressed frustration over financial matters. Is it true that you had recently threatened to withdraw support?" Thornton exhaled deeply. "Yes, the zoo's debts are high, and Fenwick refused sensible measures. I insisted he sell part of the grounds. He would not relent." "Did you believe Fenwick's stubbornness might ruin the zoo?" "I feared it would, and if the zoo failed, so would my investment." Poirot observed him carefully. "And yet, Monsieur Thornton, were you angry enough to take extreme action?" Thornton's face darkened. "No, monsieur, I'm a man of business, not violence." "But money and pride can drive men to desperate measures," Poirot said quietly. Thornton's jaw tightened, but he said no more. Dr. Lillian Moore, Drivemore, entered next, her composed manner barely masking a simmering frustration. "Monsieur Poirot," she said smoothly, "I have always sought to protect the animals. Fenwick's obsession endangered them." "Did this lead to conflict?" Poirot asked. "Frequently. Our arguments were often heated." "Did any of these disagreements become personal?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Fenwick accused me of sabotage once. It was absurd, but the accusation was cruel. Did you ever confront him after that?" "Yes, but the relationship soured. I wished to resign, but was persuaded to stay for the animals' sake." Poirot noted the bitterness underlying her calm exterior. "You cared deeply, but your patience had limits." Dr. Moore nodded, eyes downcast. "Jack Collins." Lastly, Poirot spoke with the young zookeeper, Jack Collins, who appeared both nervous and earnest. "Jack, you were reprimanded by Fenwick just days ago?" Jack swallowed hard. "Yes, monsieur, I made a mistake with the reptile's feeding schedule. He was angry, but I meant no harm." "Do you feel anyone else was angry with Fenwick?" Jack looked surprised. "I don't know. He was strict with everyone." "Did you see anyone near the tribal artefacts display or the greenhouse recently?" Jack hesitated, then said, "I saw Evelyn near the greenhouse late last week." She seemed upset. Poirot's eyebrow arched slightly. Why do you think she was upset? Jack shrugged. I don't know, monsieur, but she left quickly when she noticed me. After the interviews, Poirot sat back, fingers steepled thoughtfully. Each person had motives, fears, and secrets, yet none confessed to wrongdoing. Still the mystery deepened. What had Evelyn been doing near the greenhouse? What did Fenwick's orchid cure really involve? And why had the master key been lost only to reappear near the crime scene? Poirot knew these questions would lead him deeper into the zoo's hidden world, one where human ambition and fragile animal lives collided. As the night deepened outside, Poirot whispered to himself, "The heart of this mystery lies not only in the dagger or the orchids, but in the hearts of those who walk these paths. Patience, mon ami, all shall be revealed." Chapter 5. Shadows in the Night. The night had fallen thick and heavy over the Regent Zoological Gardens. The usual hum of nocturnal life, the distant calls of owls, the rustling of small creatures in the undergrowth, was punctuated by an occasional soft bark or low growl from the animal enclosures. But beneath this natural symphony, Poirot sensed an unnatural tension, an unseen presence lingering in the shadows. Having spent the day interviewing the key suspects and examining the clues, Poirot was convinced the answer to Alistair Fenwick's murder lay not only in the events of the day, but in what transpired under the cover of night. If someone had planned the crime, surely they had moved stealthily through these grounds when few were watching. He asked Inspector Mallory to arrange for a discreet night watch and for Hastings to accompany him on a late patrol around the zoo's more secluded areas. They set off just after midnight, armed only with a lantern and their sharp wits. The first stop was the greenhouse, where the rare orchids bloomed in the humid warmth, undisturbed by daylight visitors. Poirot crouched near the glass door, inspecting for signs of forced entry. "There is none," he murmured. "The murderer must have had a key." Hastings shone his lantern around, catching glints of moisture on the leaves and the faint outline of footprints in the soft earth beneath the pots. Poirot traced the prints carefully. These are fresh, and they lead towards the rear service entrance. They moved cautiously, following the path through the misty shadows to the back gates. Here, Poirot noticed something peculiar, a small scrap of paper caught beneath a rusty bolt. He picked it up with a gloved hand. It was a torn piece of a letter with just a few words visible. "Emps, meet at midnight. No one must see." Chapter 5. Shadows in the Night. The night had fallen thick and heavy over the Regent Zoological Gardens. The usual hum of nocturnal life, the distant calls of owls, the rustling of small creatures in the undergrowth, was punctuated by an occasional soft bark or low growl from the animal enclosures. But beneath this natural symphony, Poirot sensed an unnatural tension, an unseen presence lingering in the shadows. Having spent the day interviewing the key suspects and examining the clues, Poirot was convinced the answer to Alistair Fenwick's murder lay not only in the events of the day, but in what transpired under the cover of night. If someone had planned the crime, surely they had moved stealthily through these grounds when few were watching. He asked Inspector Mallory to arrange for a discreet night watch and for Hastings to accompany him on a late patrol around the zoo's more secluded areas. They set off just after midnight, armed only with a lantern and their sharp wits. The first stop was the greenhouse, where the rare orchids bloomed in the humid warmth, undisturbed by daylight visitors. Poirot crouched near the glass door, inspecting for signs of forced entry. "There is none," he murmured. "The murderer must have had a key." Hastings shone his lantern around, catching glints of moisture on the leaves and the faint outline of footprints in the soft earth beneath the pots. Poirot traced the prints carefully. These are fresh, and they lead towards the rear service entrance. They moved cautiously, following the path through the misty shadows to the back gates. Here, Poirot noticed something peculiar. A small scrap of paper caught beneath a rusty bolt. He picked it up with a gloved hand. It was a torn piece of a letter with just a few words visible. "Emps, meet at midnight. No one must see." Hastings frowned. A secret meeting? Could it be connected to the murder? "Perhaps," Poirot said softly. "We must learn more." Next, they patrolled the tribal artifacts room, now sealed and quiet. Poirot lingered by the door, recalling the dagger's significance. Not merely a weapon, but a symbol of authority and threat. Suddenly, a faint sound echoed through the corridor. Footsteps, light and hurried. Poirot and Hastings exchanged glances. They slipped silently down the hall, the lantern's glow flickering over polished wooden panels. Around the corner they spotted a shadow darting into the darkness near the reptile house. "After him," Poirot whispered, quickening his pace. They hurried, but the figure vanished into the maze of enclosures. At the edge of the reptile house, Poirot caught sight of the fresh scratches on the fence. Marks of a struggle, perhaps. Nearby, the earth was freshly disturbed, as if someone had hastily buried or hidden something. Poirot knelt to examine the ground and found a small vial, half buried and stained with a dark residue. "Poison," he said grimly. The vial was taken to Doctor Moore the next morning. She examined the contents carefully. "This is a potent toxin extracted from the midnight bloom orchid," she explained, her voice tense. "Highly dangerous in concentrated form. This could kill quickly if injected or ingested." Poirot's mind raced. So the murder weapon was not only the dagger, but also this poison? Dr. Moore nodded. Yes, the dagger could have been a distraction or used to inflict a non-fatal wound. Poirot now understood the complexity of the crime, a carefully planned act involving deception and multiple methods. But who had the knowledge and access to such rare toxins? He thought back to the notebook Clara Finch had shown him, full of notes on the orchid's properties and antidotes. "Clara," Poirot said when they summoned her to the office, "you were assisting Monsieur Fenwick with these experiments?" "Yes, Monsieur Poirot," she replied nervously. "But I had no reason to harm him. I admired his passion." "Then tell me, did you know anyone else who had access to the greenhouse and the research?" Clara hesitated, then whispered, "Evelyn Carrington." She often visited late at night. Poirot was struck by this new information. Evelyn's tension, her presence near the greenhouse, her private quarrels, all hinted at deeper involvement. He decided to confront her directly. That afternoon, Poirot found Evelyn in the curator's office, seated by the window and staring out at the gardens. "Miss Carrington," Poirot began calmly, "I have learned of your nocturnal visits to the greenhouse. Pray, what were you doing there after hours?" Evelyn looked startled but composed herself quickly. "I was checking on the plants. Monsieur Fenwick's work was dangerous and I feared accidents." "Accidents or something else?" She met his gaze steadily. "I feared sabotage." "Sabotage? Yes, there were tensions with others who opposed Fenwick's research." Poirot pressed further. "And did you act on these fears? Did you confront anyone?" Evelyn's hands clenched in her lap. "I confronted Fenwick. I warned him to stop, but I did not kill him." Poirot studied her carefully. "You say the dagger is symbolic. Perhaps a warning?" "Yes," Evelyn said softly. "The dagger is part of the tribal artifacts, a symbol of protection and power. To use it against Fenwick was to send a message." Poirot nodded thoughtfully, the pieces slowly forming a clearer picture. Miss Carrington, do you know of anyone who might wish to silence Fenwick permanently? Evelyn looked down. I fear Dr. Moore. She was furious with Fenwick's refusal to prioritize animal welfare over experiments. Poirot thanked her and left, mulling over the revelations. That evening, Poirot met with Inspector Mallory. We have a tangled web indeed, Poirot said. Murder by poison and blade, secret meetings in the night, and tensions boiling beneath the surface. Mallory sighed. It's difficult to know whom to trust. Precisely, Poirot replied, but the night is a veil, and soon the sun will shine on hidden truths. As the shadows lengthened once more over the zoo, Poirot felt the keen stirrings of his little grey cells. The final acts of this drama were drawing near. Each suspect held secrets, but only one held the key to justice, and Poirot was determined to find it. Chapter 6. The Web Tightens. The morning after their nocturnal investigation dawned cold and grey, casting a subdued light over Regent Zoological Gardens. A thin mist hovered over the enclosures, lending an eerie stillness to the sprawling grounds. Yet inside the administrative offices, the atmosphere was tense and expectant. Hercule Poirot sat at his desk, a small pile of papers before him, notes from the interviews, observations from the crime scene, and Clara Finch's scientific notebook. His keen eyes moved quickly over the text, as if the words themselves might reveal the missing piece of the puzzle. Inspector Mallory paced nearby, tapping his fingers impatiently against the desk. Monsieur Poirot, I must say, this case is more convoluted than I expected. Everyone seems to have secrets and no one a clear alibi. Exactement, Inspector, Poirot agreed, steepling his fingers beneath his sharp nose. But secrets like threads can be followed and woven into a pattern. We must only be patient and methodical. A visit to Clara Finch Poirot had made up his mind to speak with Clara Finch again. Her knowledge of the orchids and their toxins was essential, and the young botanist's reticence suggested she might be hiding more than simple fear. Clara greeted them quietly in the greenhouse, the tropical warmth embracing them once more. Her face was pale, eyes flickering nervously. Monsieur Poirot? She began hesitantly. I wish to help. I fear the truth is darker than I imagined. Please, mademoiselle, speak freely. Your honesty is vital, Poirot said gently. Clara took a deep breath. Monsieur Fenwick's research was not only about medicine, he was experimenting with extracts from the midnight bloom to create a toxin, a powerful weapon. He believed it could be used to control animals or people. Poirot raised an eyebrow. Monsieur Fenwick's ambition was dangerous indeed. Yes, Clara continued, and some opposed his work fiercely. There were threats, letters and warnings. Threats from whom? Clara hesitated. From an anonymous source. The letters warned him to stop or face consequences. Poirot exchanged a glance with Inspector Mallory. Do you still have these letters? I kept them hidden, Clara admitted. I feared they would be discovered. She retrieved a small bundle of folded papers from her satchel. The letters were scrawled in harsh, threatening handwriting, demanding Fenwick cease his experiments or suffer harm. Poirot examined them carefully. The language is passionate and personal. The sender knew him well. Indeed, Clara said, but I cannot say who it was. Confronting Dr. Moore. Next on Poirot's list was Dr. Lillian Moore, the zoologist whose hostility toward Fenwick's methods had been well documented. Poirot found her in her office, poring over veterinary reports. She looked up sharply at their arrival, her composure unbroken. Doctor, Moore, I must speak with you about these threats and your feelings toward Monsieur Fenwick. She folded her hands tightly. I admit to disliking Fenwick's reckless disregard for animal welfare. But I would never harm him. Yet your anger was real, Poirot said softly. Enough to threaten or frighten. Dr. Moore's eyes flashed. I only wished to protect the animals. Protection sometimes takes harsh forms, Poirot observed. Did you write any of the letters threatening Monsieur Fenwick? Her face hardened. Number that is a lie. Poirot studied her carefully. Then you fear someone else wishes to cast suspicion on you. Dr. Moore's breath caught. Yes. A hidden alliance. As the day wore on, Poirot delved deeper into Fenwick's private correspondence, which the police had retrieved from his office. Among routine letters and scientific journals, one envelope stood out, a letter from Giles Thornton, the zoo's benefactor. The letter was curt and businesslike, but Poirot noticed a peculiar phrase. The preservation of this institution is paramount, even if certain sacrifices must be made. Monsieur Poirot frowned. Sacrifices? This language is troubling. He sought out Inspector Mallory. We must speak with Monsieur Thornton again. Thornton was less defensive this time, but his irritation was evident. I have done nothing illegal, he insisted. My priority is the zoo's survival. Yet your letter suggests otherwise, Poirot said quietly. Who were these sacrifices you mentioned? Thornton's face paled slightly. I meant difficult decisions, not murder. Still, monsieur, your threats might have encouraged someone else. Thornton hesitated, then sighed. Fenwick was reckless with funds and ethics. I feared a scandal that would destroy us all. A twist in the tale, Poirot's reflections were interrupted by a startling report from Inspector Mallory. A staff member had come forward with new information. Jack Collins, the zookeeper, revealed that Evelyn Carrington and Dr. Moore had been seen meeting secretly near the orchid greenhouse late at night, just days before the murder. This is unexpected, Poirot said, stroking his moustache. An alliance between the two women who appeared at odds. Why would they meet secretly? Mallory wondered. To discuss a plan, perhaps. Or to settle disputes, Poirot mused. We must question them further. The interrogation, Poirot arranged a meeting with Evelyn and Dr. Moore together, observing their reactions carefully. Miss Carrington, Dr. Moore, Poirot began, it appears you have been in secret conference. Care to explain? Both women exchanged uneasy glances. Evelyn spoke first. We were discussing how to stop Monsieur Fenwick's experiments. We agreed they were too dangerous. Dr. Moore nodded. Our concerns coincided. We wished only to protect the animals and the zoo. Did your plan include confronting him? Yes, Evelyn said, but not harm. Did it include involving others? Evelyn shook her head. No. Poirot studied their faces. Then who wrote the threatening letters? Neither answered. A new suspect emerges later. Poirot reviewed the list of zoo staff again and found an unfamiliar name. Simon Yates, a new night guard recently hired. Mallory investigated and reported Simon had been seen loitering near the tribal artefacts room on the night of the murder. Poirot smiled faintly. The plot thickens. As the day ended, Poirot felt the web of secrets tighten around them all. Each revelation opened new questions, but the truth lurked close. Mon ami Hastings, Poirot said later, we must prepare for the final act. The truth will be revealed soon, but only by unmasking the heart of this tangled web. Chapter 7. The Final Clues. The days that followed felt like a delicate dance of shadows and light for Hercule Poirot. Every encounter, every overheard conversation, seemed to ripple with meaning, though the truth remained elusive. The Regent Zoological Gardens, once a place of quiet curiosity and scientific pursuit, had transformed into a theatre of suspicion and concealed agendas. Poirot, with his characteristic precision, knew that to unravel the mystery of Alistair Fenwick's murder, he must sift through these tangled threads with the utmost care. A breakthrough in the Artefacts room. The previous night, under the guise of a routine inspection, Poirot returned to the tribal artifacts room. He examined the display carefully, noting the placement of the dagger among the relics. His sharp eyes caught something he had missed before, a faint smear on the glass case, almost invisible, but unmistakably a fingerprint. He fetched a magnifying glass and scrutinized the mark. The print was partial, but clear enough for a match. With a quiet nod, Poirot instructed Inspector Mallory to send it for comparison against the zoo staff's prints. Later that afternoon, the results arrived. "It matches Simon Yates, the new night guard," Mallory announced. Poirot's eyes sparkled. "Ah, our shadow in the night returns, but why leave a fingerprint on the dagger case?" "Carelessness," Mallory suggested. "Or a message," Poirot murmured. "A closer." "Look at Simon Yates." Simon Yates was brought in for questioning. Poirot observed the young man closely. Nervous, evasive, yet defiant. "Monsieur Yates," Poirot began smoothly, "you were seen near the Artefacts room on the night Monsieur Fenwick was killed. Can you explain your presence?" Simon shifted in his chair. "I was making my rounds, that's all." "Yet you left your fingerprint on the dagger's case." Simon swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to. I was just curious." "Curious about what?" Simon hesitated. "I heard stories about the dagger, about curses." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Do you believe in such things?" Simon's face paled. "No, but it makes a good story." The missing journal Poirot's investigation soon uncovered another vital clue. A journal belonging to Fenwick had gone missing from his office, a journal that might contain notes on his experiments, his enemies, and his fears. Clara Finch admitted she had seen the journal last, but claimed she did not know where it had gone. Poirot considered the possibilities. Someone had deliberately removed it to hide or destroy evidence. "Who had access to Fenwick's office?" he asked. "All the senior staff," Mallory replied, "and night staff with keys." A nighttime discovery. Determined to recover the journal, Poirot arranged a covert search of the zoo's storage areas, particularly the lockers and staff rooms. In a dusty corner near the greenhouse, Hastings spotted a leather-bound notebook hidden beneath a pile of old crates. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside were detailed accounts of Fenwick's work, his successes, failures, and, notably, a list of threats he had received. The last entry was chilling. "I fear my work will end soon. They will stop me at any cost." The puzzle pieces align. Piecing together these discoveries, Poirot reflected aloud. The murderer was someone with intimate knowledge of the toxin, the dagger, and Fenwick's habits. They knew the greenhouse, the animal enclosures, and how to move unseen at night. He turned to Inspector Mallory. "We must confront our suspects one last time. Watch their reactions closely." The gathering Poirot summoned Evelyn Carrington, Doctor, Lillian Moore, Giles Thornton, Clara Finch, and Jack Collins to the zoo's drawing room. The atmosphere was taut with anticipation. "My friends," Poirot began, "we have uncovered many secrets. Tonight, I will reveal the truth behind Monsieur Fenwick's death." Eyes widened, breaths caught. Poirot spoke calmly but firmly, recounting the evidence, the missing journal, the fingerprint on the dagger case, the threatening letters, and the poison vial. He observed each suspect intently, noting flickers of emotion: fear, guilt, defiance. "Yet one thing puzzles me," Poirot said. "The motive. Why murder? Why now?" An unexpected confession. Suddenly Evelyn Carrington stood, her face pale but resolute. "Monsieur Poirot, I must confess something." The room fell silent. "I did not kill Fenwick," she said quietly. "But I did hide the journal." She paused, glancing at the others. "I feared what might happen if his experiments continued unchecked. I wanted to protect the zoo and the animals from harm." Poirot nodded slowly. "Your intentions were good, but your actions complicated matters." The final revelation. Poirot turned to Dr. Lillian Moore. "And you, madame, what is your truth?" Dr. Moore met his gaze unwaveringly. "I wrote the letters. I wanted to scare Fenwick into stopping, but never to kill him." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Then who is our murderer?" A tense moment passed. "Gentlemen and ladies," Poirot said, "the culprit is closer than you think." He reached into his pocket and produced a small item, the missing master key found concealed in Simon Yates's belongings. "The key to the greenhouse and the offices," Poirot explained. "Simon Yates had access and opportunity." Simon's face twisted in anger. "I did not kill him." "Yet you left your fingerprint on the dagger case and you were found near the scene," Poirot countered. Simon's defiance faltered. "It was an accident," he blurted. "I wanted to stop Fenwick's experiments, but I didn't mean to kill him. I confronted him, and things went wrong." Justice served. Simon Yates's confession cleared the air, though the sorrow remained heavy. Poirot looked at the group, his voice gentle. "Monsieur Fenwick's death is a tragedy born of fear, ambition, and misunderstanding, but the law must take its course." Inspector Mallory nodded. "We will ensure justice is done." As the guests departed, Hastings turned to Poirot. "Bravo, mon ami. Once again, your little grey cells have triumphed." Poirot smiled modestly. "Merci, Hastings, but it is the truth that prevails. And in the quiet corners of this zoo, life will continue, with lessons learned." Chapter 8. The Denouement. The drawing room of the Regent Zoological Gardens had never before hosted such a gathering charged with anticipation and quiet tension. The usual soft murmur of wildlife beyond the windows was replaced by a solemn stillness as Hercule Poirot prepared to reveal the solution to the mystery that had gripped the zoo since the tragic death of Alistair Fenwick. With his impeccable posture, neatly combed hair, and those ever-alert little grey cells, Poirot stood before the assembled group: Inspector Mallory, Evelyn Carrington, Dr. Lillian Moore, Clara Finch, Giles Thornton, and Jack Collins. Simon Yates was notably absent, held in custody pending formal charges. Poirot began with the calm, deliberate tone that bespoke confidence and mastery. Setting the stage. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot said, "we have over the past days examined many facets of this unfortunate case. Motives, opportunities, threats and deceptions have all danced before us like shadows upon the wall. It is time for the light of truth to be cast upon this intricate web." He paused, allowing his words to settle. The death of Monsieur Alistair Fenwick was not a mere crime of passion nor a simple accident. It was a carefully orchestrated act, a complex interplay of fear, ambition, and betrayal. Reviewing the evidence, Poirot began to recount the crucial evidence. Monsieur Fenwick was a man driven by his grand vision, but also by controversy. His experiments with the midnight bloom orchid toxin threatened not only the animals, but the very future of the zoo. He turned to Evelyn Carrington. "You, Miss Carrington, harbored grave concerns for the well-being of the creatures under our care. Your secret meetings with Dr. Moore were attempts to prevent harm, not cause it." Evelyn nodded, her expression earnest. "That is true, Monsieur Poirot. Dr. Moore, your letters, though harsh, were born of frustration and fear. You wished only to protect. Yet the line between warning and menace is easily crossed. Dr. Moore's gaze remained steady. "I did not intend murder." "Indeed," Poirot acknowledged. "The role of Giles Thornton—" "Monsieur Thornton," Poirot continued, "your letter spoke of sacrifices to preserve the zoo. Your pragmatism was severe, but you did not stoop to murder. Instead, you sought to rein in Monsieur Fenwick's recklessness through pressure and persuasion." Thornton's jaw tightened, but he did not deny Poirot's assessment. The night guard's deception. Poirot then shifted his gaze toward the last absent person, Simon Yates. Simon Yates was a young man recently employed as a night guard. His fingerprints were found on the glass case containing the dagger, and he was seen near the scene of the crime. But Simon's role is not as simple as it appears. Poirot began to recount Simon's confession. Simon confronted Monsieur Fenwick, intent on stopping the experiments he believed dangerous, but what began as a heated argument quickly escalated. The dagger was drawn, a struggle ensued, and in the confusion, Simon administered the orchid toxin, an act intended to incapacitate, not kill. Poirot's eyes met those of his audience. However, the dose was lethal, and Monsieur Fenwick died. Unveiling the mastermind. But Poirot was not finished. The story would be incomplete without considering one final element, the missing journal. He gestured to Clara Finch. "Clara, you found and hid the journal. You feared what it might reveal about Fenwick's ambitions and enemies. Yet, the journal held more than scientific notes. It contained a secret correspondence between Monsieur Fenwick and an unknown party." Poirot produced a folded letter from his pocket. This letter reveals a sinister plot, a blackmail scheme involving a person in a position of trust at the zoo. A person who wished to control the zoo's future and saw Monsieur Fenwick's work as an obstacle. The unexpected culprit. Poirot's voice softened but firmed with authority. "The true mastermind behind the murder is none other than Jack Collins, the seemingly loyal zookeeper." A gasp rippled through the room. "Jack," Poirot continued, "your position gave you access to all parts of the zoo. You feared that Fenwick's radical methods would endanger the animals and your own standing, so you conspired with Simon Yates, supplying him with knowledge of the toxin and encouraging confrontation." Jack's face twisted, his composure broken. "I never wanted Fenwick dead," he stammered, "only to stop him. The plan was to scare him, but things got out of hand." Poirot's psychological acumen. Poirot smiled gently. "Indeed, monsieur, fear and ambition often cloud judgment. But the truth is, the crime's complexity was born of many hands, each with motives, yet only one fatal act." He looked around the room, eyes alighting on each person. Evelyn and Dr. Moore acted from compassion, Giles Thornton from pragmatism, Clara from fear, Simon from impulsiveness. But it was Jack Collins who orchestrated the fatal encounter, manipulating others to achieve his ends. The moral reflection. Poirot's tone grew reflective. This case teaches us much about human nature, how fear can drive men to desperation, how loyalty and love can become twisted, how ambition can blind us to consequences. He paused, then concluded, "Justice will be served, but let us also remember mercy." Closing the case, Inspector Mallory stepped forward, nodding respectfully to Poirot. "Thank you, Monsieur Poirot. Your insight has brought clarity where there was confusion. We will proceed with the necessary charges." As the guests began to disperse, Hastings turned to Poirot with admiration. "Bravo, mon ami! Your intellect is as sharp as ever." Poirot smiled, his eyes twinkling. "Merci, Hastings, but it is the human heart, with all its complexities, that is the greatest mystery." The night descended once more over the Regent Zoological Gardens, now quiet, but for the gentle rustling of leaves and distant calls of animals. Justice was at hand, and the balance restored. And in the stillness, Poirot's little grey cells rested, for now, ready for their next challenge.